Hello everybody and welcome to another list video here at Playing Board Games. To put some context for this video, this is coming out on October 30th. Tomorrow is Halloween. I'm a big Halloween buff. I love horror movies. I love horror. I've always liked Halloween. So October's a very, fun month. It's also why I was drawn to Arkham Horror in general. Just the horror part is in the name. It's what I love. So what I wanted to do for kind of celebration of Halloween is to talk about 5 of the scariest scenarios, at least in my opinion. This is a very subjective list, like this is all basically just what I find scary or what makes a scenario scary for me. So before I get started into the actual list, I kind of wanted to give some context to everything that I have here. Board games are not scary. There's no anxiety or risk when it comes to playing a board game. So being able to actually achieve a mood or a feeling of fear in a player is very rare for Arkham Horror, the card game, at least for me. But there is scenarios where I would call the thing scary. This isn't, I'm going to say right now, the Unspeakable Oath is not on this list. I'm scared of Unspeakable Oath because of board gaming related reasons. I am scared of Unspeakable Oath because I want to win the scenario, not because I'm scared of what is in the scenario. So instead, what I looked for this list was pieces of the scenario of what makes things scary in a board game. Mood is a big part of that. If the mood for the scenario is very unsettling and you can just feel as if something was wrong, it drew me to this list. If it feels like you have your back against the wall for the majority, if not the entirety of the scenario, that to me makes things scary. If you feel like you are on the back foot in terms of your ability to make progress, that is something that is scary. There are scenarios like In Too Deep that require you to run away from a horde of fish people, but I wouldn't necessarily call it scary. It's a little bit more pulpy, right? Same with The Forgotten Age. The Forgotten Age isn't necessarily a scary campaign, but it is a very pulpy campaign. It's very action-oriented. That's the nice thing about Arkham Horror is they explore different themes in their horror from the campaign. Carcosa, we just finished Carcosa week. That's all about madness and going crazy, right? Circle Undone is all about the deep-rooted decisions, the deep-rooted sins of the past coming up to haunt the present, right? That's kind of like what the Circle Undone is about. Scarlet Keys is a globe-trotting adventure that's kind of a little bit more pulpy, weird horror, kind of like Forgotten Age, right? So there's all these different things that come with it, and the focus is different from the campaign to campaign. And I think that some scenarios have a bit more success in their ability to be horrifying compared to others. This is again, this is a very subjective list, so I want to say if you have any scenarios that actually legitimately you would call scary, let me know in the comments down below as we get to my list here. First one on my list. Oh no! Daniel's not scary. One second, I gotta fix this. There we go. Set up everything except for getting the actual list proper. Alright, so here, first one on my list is The Last King. No, this is not a continuation of Carcosa Week, but I think The Last King is probably the first scenario in Arkham Horror that I would consider to actually be a scary or tense scenario when it comes to the theming of it. This one does hits some of the boxes that I talked about previously. The vibe of this scenario is off. The vibe of this scenario is just something is strange immediately when you're reading the first text on the act and agenda, where the party is happening and then you read on the location the location flavor text and you're like, oh, this guy just has no hands. He's just bony stumps asking for my coat, right? So right away something is off. The encounter cards themselves aren't necessarily scary to go with this, but the vibe of the whole night is, oh, something maddening is happening here, and this is something that we should kind of just be worried about and be a little bit defensive, right? This is something in the back of my head is telling me that something is wrong here, what do I do to defend myself from like the flavor standpoint and the theming standpoint. This hits ahead when you get the first guest that flips. When suddenly these people that you were talking to at this nightmare party suddenly start becoming the nightmares. I think there's a lot of impact in this scenario for how scary it is depending on the party goer that flips first. So, for example, Sebastian Moreau turning into just a werewolf beast-like creature is a pretty typical trope, right? Like, that is something that is not necessarily going to necessarily blow your socks off, right? Or Jordan Perry turning into Magma Man from Mega Man, right? Like, that's not something that is going to really leave a lasting impression. But my first party guest that flipped when I was playing my blind play, and also Travis and Bryn's blind play, was Ishimaru Haruko, who rips a page right out of Resident Evil and turns into like this centipede demon where her spine continues to extend and extend and extend, and she's just crawling around on the floor being like, "Don't you love my dress?" And that's horrifying. That's a horrifying mental image. And that's, I think, as I said, a big reason why this scenario, theme-wise, can really resonate depending on how you had your partygoers flip in your blind play. But it's a very sticking point for me for that. Mechanically, I think this scenario does have a little bit of that horrifying feeling, where it's the fact that these partygoers are going to chase you down and try to kill you, and because of the Ancient Evils of the Encounter deck, you have very little time to beat one before another one is just showing up, chasing you down, attempting to corner you and kill you, while also having to deal with the maniacs and the young psychopaths that are also causing chaos in the party as well. So The Last King, easily in my top 5 scariest scenarios. Next one we have here is the Silent Heath. And I'm going to be honest with all of you, there is a lot of Hemlock Vale on this list. When I think about what makes the Feast of Hemlock Vale my favorite, like one of my favorites campaigns, is the scenarios are really good mechanically, but all the scenarios kind of pass a really good vibe check, you know, where this island is just wrong. So again, this has that weird feeling of something is wrong here. And the Silent Heath is probably the scenario in the Feast of Hemlock Vale that is most directly connected to the impact of spoilers. So if you do not want to have spoilers for the Feast of Hemlock Vale, I highly advise you either skip ahead or just, come back and watch this when you finished it. But the Silent Heath has the biggest impact of the color out of space actually on the island, where we see how this has had long-term effects and has been here kind of gestating for a very long period of time. This is a very post-apocalyptic feeling of a scenario where this town, this estate, the Pearl family estate that once had all this like life in it, is now just a barren, ashen husk of itself. And yeah, the bugs are scary, but the bugs aren't what make this scenario scary. What makes this scenario scary, in my opinion, is that you actually see the fallout on regular people in a way where it's like you are the protagonists of a weird horror, cosmic horror short story, as opposed to the protagonists of kind of just like a pulpy horror story, right? This is a scary, unsettling vibe to walk into, to see this place where the trees are like glass-like, and the ground is barren and covered in just like white sand, and there's a giant hole that there is skittering and chittering coming out of. And then when you start exploring it, you find the bloated, the disfigured corpses of the people that previously lived here, and you have to carry those corpses around to like give them a proper rest, but at the same time, holding them, moving them is causing you pain and suffering and horror, and it's terrifying. This is an absolutely morbid and fucked up concept for a scenario, and I love it. It's my favorite like thematic scenario in the campaign. Just an absolutely incredible vibe. And I think that the scenario, when you really strip it down, take away the mechanics and just look at the theme, it's very, very scary. Eric had a similar reaction in our blind play, and it's why I knew Eric would really like Feast of Hemlock Vale, and it turns out Eric really likes Feast of Hemlock Vale. While this scenario doesn't hit the box of being like oppressive, I think that the vibes of the scenario are so big, and that's why it deserves a spot on this list. Next up, we have the Twisted Hollow, another scenario for Feast of Hemlock Vale. I think Feast of Hemlock Vale is actually a very scary campaign. There is a lot of... So it's a little bit different than, say, for example, Circle Undone. Well, Circle Undone, yes, ghosts are scary. Boo, you know, like that kind of is all very spooky. But there's a lot of like, you're just fading like cultists and witches. Again, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, right? But for example, with like, or even like Innsmouth, like Deep Ones, fish people, scary. Even scarier if you're H.P. Lovecraft and you're afraid of other people, right? Like it's another thing. It's like, it's all very scary in theory. But this perverse, twisted nature changing around you, where animals that were at once like docile now start becoming like rabid and crazed and mutating, is a very scary sort of vibe as you're trying to just explore the island. I think the designers did a very good job with the Feast of Hemlock Vale when it came to the fact that night feels scary. The two night scenarios, the Twisted Hollow and the Longest Night, they're very tough scenarios, and like the vibe of them is very spooky. So let's stop. Longest Night may or may not be on this list. I'm gonna hold my tongue on that one. But the Twisted Hollow is the first of the two night scenarios in this campaign, not counting the finale. But a big thing for this one is that I think the designers did a very good job of feeling the idea of exploring dark woods with a lantern that you're desperately holding on to try to make it light is very well accomplished. While a lot of that fear comes through the scenario mechanically, in the sense that I don't want to be outside of the dark because it means that I will draw an encounter card, I think that that does a pretty alright job of carrying that fear into like the theming of it as well. I also really like the use of the pursuit area for this scenario, because it kind of just like makes you feel as if like those are the creatures watching you as you're scanning your lantern across the tree line, and you can just see like the dark, like the white glowing eyes looking back at you from like the light reflecting off their eyes. I think that like paints a really cool picture in my head. But this is a very desperate scenario. This scenario is all about trying to find someone who is missing, and the agenda is actually pretty tight, and the last half can be particularly swingy as you're desperately trying to escape. This is also the first appearance of the Ursine hybrid, I think it's called Ursine hybrid, but the bear. We all know the bear. The bear is a very spooky, scary enemy, and he is a pretty tough boss fight for this first scenario, because it's actually only the second scenario of the campaign, of the first night scenarios here. But the dude is tough and big, and obviously a great homage to Annihilation, which you haven't seen, you should watch, because you can tell Hemlock Vale was very much inspired by that book and that movie. But Twisted Hollow just hits all the right notes that I think makes a scenario scary. It has a big fear of the dark, which is like the often said to be the oldest fear, right? And I think that Twisted Hollow does a really good job of making that resonate while being mechanically interesting, and also having kind of like that mad rush of trying to escape when the shit hits the fan. And I think that's a big accomplishment and makes it a very spooky scenario. Next one here. Now, I know I've been talking a little bit of shit about Circle Undone, saying it's not that spooky, right? But I actually think Before the Black Throne is probably one of the most oppressive feeling scenarios in Arkham Horror. We often called this one of the best finales because of its vibe. And I think it's also, it's incredibly challenging. First off, I'm not going to talk too much about the difficulty here. I want to focus on what makes it scary. But I think the fact that it's so alien and depressing, I think does a really good job of painting a scene and making it spooky. I want to highlight a specific thing. I want to paint this picture for you to maybe kind of get what I'm trying to say across here. But imagine the world is at its apocalyptic end, and you are the only one who can stop it. You've been fighting through Arkham Horror, dealing with the witches and the Silver Twilight Lodge, and you realize their plan was to summon this blind idiot god and It's bad, and only you can stop it. You step through the portal. You're kind of going through this vast cosmos of space as you try to make sense of it. Dimensions are opening and moving in front of you. You're sliding through space and time, and then you find a human, a cultist of Azathoth. And what does that guy do? He commits ritual suicide in front of you. It's a very nihilistic, bleak look that these people are trying to bring across the end of the world, where you can finally find a hope spot. There's another person here. Maybe they can join our fight against Azathoth, and then that motherfucker says, no, it's hopeless. The blind idiot god is going to wake up, the Daemon Sultan is going to be here, and we're all going to accept it. This is a very kind of like bleak look, and it's one of the things that I actually really enjoy that Before the Black Throne does narratively. I'm a big fan of horror that is kind of challenging, and I think that this is something that is a little bit harder for them to do in official product, but I think a lot of custom campaigns can explore these themes very well, in my opinion. But I'm very happy whenever I see it happen in official product, because I think it's very cool and very exciting, and also just, it's like one of those things where, like, if they did it all the time, it wouldn't pop that much. But this is like the corpses of the family in the Silent Heath, right? Where it's that, oh, wow, this is actually real. This is actually horrifying. This is actually happening. I'm in this story and I'm drawn in, and I can't escape it, right? Like, that's the big thing. A lot of these scenarios, yeah, you can resign in Silent Heath, right? But in the Before the Black Throne, you can't. It's you versus the end of the world, and there are people actively trying to stop you. Mechanically, yes, it's a very easy way to implement it, but I think like the narrative purpose is what pushes it into the scariest scenario. Not to mention the fact that you see Azathoth just like in the distance. He's always there, watching, waiting to wake up, like just slowly getting closer and closer, because like the flute players are going to cease. It's a very dark, very bleak scenario. Mechanically, it's very challenging, and I think that thematically, it's very, very scary. All right, last one here. This shouldn't really be a surprise. I think this is the easily the scariest scenario in Arkham Horror, the card game. This is The Longest Night. This is a tower defense mission where you are desperately trying to survive a few hours waiting for the sun to rise to protect some people, some sacrifices that the people of Hemlock are trying to feed to the animals that are frenzied by the color. This scenario sticks with you. When I played it the first time, I was blown away by how much I felt pushed into a corner. Every time I have to play this scenario in the Feast of Hemlock Vale, I'm like, yeah, but what if I just didn't? Because I'm kind of just like scared about what I have to go against here, right? The enemies are non-stop because you draw enemies every encounter phase in addition to the encounter cards that you would drawing normally from the encounter deck. A lot of the enemies have ways to circumvent the ways that you desperately try to barricade up walls or lay traps or lay decoys for them. And a lot of the enemies are elite. So they, I mean, mechanically are a little bit harder to deal with, right? I don't know if that does too much for the scary thing, but it kind of all paints this big picture where I think The Longest Night is the perfect mixture of fear thematically and fear mechanically. I think it's the only scenario on this list that kind of blends all of this together, right? It's non-stop threats coming at you, so you very rarely get time to breathe. It starts slow, where it's like you see the waves of enemies coming in, and then eventually the waves aren't stopping, and you're like, can we get a moment to breathe? And the answer, unless you teched for it amazingly, is unfortunately no. You're going to have to keep dealing with this. There's also the sense of feeling like you need to protect these people who were morphed and twisted and are now just being forced into sacrifice by them. Again, this is another dark theme. I think Hemlock has a lot of dark themes, which I think make it actually kind of spooky. As it, like, there's nothing wrong with throwing a spear at a fishman, or like running away from snakes through a temple, but it's not the same thing, at least for me personally. And again, this is a very subjective list, so I preface this video with that at the start of this. But I play the scenario and I want to save the hostages, like the Star Children or whatever they're called. I want to make sure they're okay because they are in a very unfortunate position where they are just being manipulated and sent to their lambs to the slaughter just because Mother Rachel deems it so, right? And I have a big like hook into that because of this, but I also put myself into the shoes of my investigator, and I'm just... I imagine myself there, and I'm like, this would literally be hell on earth. This would be the scariest, most painful, most fucked up, most please get me out of here hours of my life if I had to deal with this, right? I like the hope spots where like the villagers come to help you, like the villagers of Hemlock. All that stuff is really cool. I like that you can use them to help beat these things. I like the fact that you can like light fires, but those fires can come back to bite you. So like mechanically and thematically, again, it does a lot of really cool things. I like that the bear is back, and the bear is scary, and the bear is like, I'm here from turn one, and I'm gonna ruin your freaking life. There are so many awesome pieces that come together. It doesn't give you room to breathe. It's a very scary theming, and it's also, I think, as I said, very scary mechanically, because this is a scenario that does not stop and it asks so much of you as a player. So it actually is probably one of the few scenarios that mixes it all together. With Unspeakable Oath, as I mentioned at the start, I'm scared of playing Unspeakable Oath, but I wouldn't call the scenario scary. I'm scared because I don't want to lose my investigator, right? With The Longest Night, I don't want to play The Longest Night, and I'm scared of The Longest Night, but it's all because of the mechanics of the scenario. So I think it's the biggest accomplishment when it comes to what makes a scenario scary. So that's why it's on this list. This list wasn't really in like an order, but The Longest Night was easily my number one. It was the first one I thought when I thought of this list idea to celebrate Halloween. All right, and just as a reminder, Daniel is not scary. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you have a happy Halloween. Tomorrow we have the trick-or-treat video, the standalones. We do this every Halloween where we play a standalone where we build trick-or-treat decks for each other with some random scary enemies. So you can look forward to that. Otherwise, I want to thank you guys all for watching. Again, in the comments, let me know what scenarios you find scariest. I actually had a fun time trying to quantify what all this meant for me. So I would love to know how you approach it as well. So please, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, thanks for watching. See you next week for another list video. Have a good one. And as always, a GG's!